Hello everyone, today I thought we would take a look at routing in Rails. This is going to be sort of a beginner-friendly tutorial, excuse the Sons of the Forest spam, basically aimed at demystifying what the resources do when you create like a Rails scaffold. This has been covered before, but it's one of those things that I haven't really covered recently. I always like to revisit these topics just to sort of like, brush up on how these things work. So to get started, we're just going to do a Rails new video just so we have a project to work with. We'll then create a scaffold, we'll get rid of our routes, and then we'll build them from the ground up. And maybe we'll take a look at a couple of tricks that we can use when we're routing stuff so that we can make it a bit easier to work with. So the first thing that we're going to do is cd into our video app, and then we can just generate a scaffold so we have something to test with. We'll just create a post, give each post a title, and we'll give them a body of type text, just so we have something to mess with. We can then go ahead and run a Rails db:/migrate command to migrate the database, and then we can run a Rails s to start our server. We can then go over to localhost port 3000, which will take us to the default Rails page. And then we can go to /posts if we want to see the index page. Once we're here, we can then click on new post, create a post, or delete one or show one if we have one. Like if we just do test in case, we can create this. We can edit it, we can update it, and we can destroy it. So all of this stuff is handled for us by default if we run a scaffold generator. I know there's some people that don't like scaffold generators, but if you're making a CRUD model, you might as well just use what's built in and then modify it as needed. If we come into our config and our routes here, we can see these are the resources that we get out of the box. And this little block right here, I guess GitHub Copilot's a bit upset. This little block right here with the resources and the posts is sort of what's doing all of the heavy lifting. So if we get rid of all of those, we can come in here and we can actually just set the root of our application to be the post controller and the index action. And then we can comment this out. And then instead of going to /posts, if we now start our server, if we refresh the application, /posts will no longer work because we've deleted that route. So the only thing we have now is the root of our application, which is just going to be localhost port 3000. If we go there, we get an error for the new post path, which doesn't exist yet. So we have to come into our Explorer, our app, our views, our posts, and our index page, because that's what we set as our root. And then in here, we have this link to the new post, and we just kind of want to comment this out. So we can actually just grab this entire line and do like a control question mark if we want to. But basically all you have to do is make sure that you have this little hash here, and that will comment it out for you. So that'll get rid of that link. And now if we refresh, we have the empty index page. But of course, if we ever have a post here, that'll also break because we don't have this route yet. So let's come into our routes and let's take a look at what the resources actually did for us. Now, when it says resources for the posts, that of course means it's creating the necessary resources for the app controller's post controller. And in here we have the index action, the show action, the new, the edit, the create, the update, and the destroy. You can ignore the stuff down here in the private. That's not going to have a route associated with it. Those are just going to be methods that get used in the route itself, or like at the start here to set the post. But okay, we have all of these. Let's just go ahead and let's set up some stubbed data in our routes file so that we can just take a look at these. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just say, all right, we have our resources. Let's do a all post route. After we have the all post route, we can then do one for a new post. And we're just going to do some comments here. GitHub Copilot, of course, is going to be able to handle this, no problem if we need it to. But we're just doing this for the sake of clarifying what we need to do here. And I'm creating these in a specific order, like we have the all post, then the new, then the create, then the show, because that's sort of the order that we're going to run into errors when we go through the application here. Oops, let's do one more space. So we then have the edit, we have the update, and then we have the destroy at the end here, which is just going to be a delete. Oops, a delete. Okay, so for all of these are basically included out of the box when you run a resources for your posts. So of course, if you have something like your resources posts, and then you say this has a do block, and then inside of this do block, you have like a resources for the comments. What this actually does for you is it's going to give you some routes that are similar to these, but they're going to be scoped inside of your posts. So you're going to have like, instead of just having your post controller, your index action. When you go to like your post path, you're going to have like your posts comments path or your comments post path, depending on how you set this up. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is the resources can be a little bit more involved than what we're going to cover here, just because you can run into situations where you have like nested resources and stuff. In our case, we're just covering this basic application here though. So let's go ahead and let's restore that /post path that we were just at when we went to /posts. Let's bring this back. I have to save this to make sure that this works. And the way that we can do that is we can come into our all posts route right here. We can just say, all right, look, we need to get our posts. Get our posts. And then we need to tell it where it needs to go to, which is going to be our post controller and the index action. So as opposed to the root, which is just kind of telling it exactly the slash or like localhost port 3000 with nothing after it. When we say get posts, that's what the keyword is after that first slash. So if we save this and we come over here, we can now go to localhost port 3000. If we come over to our index though, if we uncomment this line right here with the new link, and then we refresh, we run into that error again. So we need that new post path. Of course, this was handled for us with the resources, but here we have to do it ourselves. And we can do something like this. I'm actually going to get rid of this last part. So we can do a get post /new, which is similar to our posts right here, and tell it to go to the post controller and the new action. But the reason why GitHub Copilot suggests having that as new post at the end here is because if we then refresh, this still won't work because it's not creating the route that we specifically need. When they create the resources, they do kind of alias it a little bit, and we can actually check this out. If we go to localhost port 3000, I think it's like /rails/info/routes. You can then, if I hit F11, you can actually search the routes in your application. And we can see here, we have the posts new path right here for /post/new, because as you create these routes, every time there's a slash after it, it gets put in that order where it's posts _new or posts _ maybe this is like your upvote. So it'd be posts _upvote _ path, etc. But the link that it generates for us with the scaffold is the new post path, not the posts new path. And that's why GitHub Copilot is suggesting that we do this as new post, because when you do this as whatever, it then becomes whatever _ path. So here we have new _post _ path, which is what the index here is telling us it needs. So if we save this routes file and then we refresh, we can now see we have a new post path right here. We can of course also search for the new post path. So we have this. And now if we come over here and we refresh, that link is now back. But of course, clicking on this link, if we think about this, is going to take us to that file in our app views post, which is the new.html.erb. And what this does for us is it renders that form, and that form has the create logic inside of it. So if we come into the post and the form, we can check in here, and this is going to create the form, and then on submit, it'll do our create action. That said, we can actually click on this. It'll render that partial, but we won't get that error until we actually submit this form. So this is still in the /post/new, although you're looking at the stuff in the form. So what we can do is we can say this is a test with a case, and I'm going to clear the console right here just by pressing enter. We click create post. We should see in here that we get the started post, and then we get a routing error, and it says no route matches post to /posts. That's where we have to come back into our routes here, and we have to do this create post route. The create post route is just going to be a post instead of a get, because we are just putting data into the backend. We're not getting data, we're actually posting it, right? So we post to whatever our overall model is here, or our our controller. And there's no additional route attached here. Like we're not going to /post/create in this case, because we have this post keyword here. It will be able to figure out that this goes to a different action if we tell it to go to a different action. So in this case, every time you do a link to a post where you're passing back data, it should be able to figure out it's a post request, and it'll go to posts and create. So if we save this, this will then take it to the create action in our controller. So up here in our app controllers, post controller. The create action is the thing that actually says here's a new post, and then do a save, and if we save successfully, redirect to that post. Of course, this redirect to that post is going to fail because we don't have a way to look at a post yet. That's this next route right here. That said, we can at least create this by doing a test in a case, and if we hit enter here and then click create post, we'll see we have the green text that tells us we've inserted this into the database, but we don't have this post's URL here. So this is where we again have to create this route by going into here and saying this is the show post. But again, if we don't have this as post here, what's going to happen is if we save this and come over to our routes, we can then refresh. You can see here we get this get for the /post/ID, but we don't have that post path that we need. So if we save this and then refresh, we can look for this get for the posts and ID, and we now see this has that route, which is that post path. Otherwise, you'd just be looking at something similar to our post request here for creating, which doesn't have a prefixed route that it needs. So by doing this, we can now come over here and we can either refresh or we can go back to our post and we can click show this post. And just to prove it, if we comment this out and save it, we can come over here and refresh, and we'll see that we run into that error where we don't have that post path again. If we uncomment this, we then should have that post path where we can click show this post. But then there's the edit post that we're running into. So the edit post is a lot like the new, where it is just a get request where we're getting the edit page, but it's also like the show where we have to pass in this ID. Because again, we're going to like /post/to, but in the case of an edit, we're actually going to like /post/to/edit, right? Because we're not going to have the ability to just do this magic right here where we can just like go to a post with an ID and just have it magically figure out what we're doing if we're doing a get request. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll say get, and we'll get the post/the ID. So it's going to be post/to, just like the show action. And then we go to the edit action afterwards, or like the edit page afterwards. And that will take us to the post controller and the edit action, which we'll take a look at in a second. And again, we're doing this as the edit post. Otherwise, we're going to get a strange path here that doesn't quite conform to what the scaffold generated for us. So, okay, let's take a look at the edit page real quick. We can come up here and go into the edit.html.erb. We can see in here, it just, again, basic HTML renders the form, so we know there's nothing funky going on there. But of course, when we submit the form, we expect it to not work again because it's going to be doing the update action and not the create action. So if we come into our controller, just to remind you, or if you're not familiar, the create action right here creates a new post, and then the update actually just puts in whatever you changed, and it calls update on that post. So these are two separate actions, and we have the new and the edit, and then both of these are going to render that form. But the form is going to go to a different location depending on if it's an existing one or not. So if we come over to our edit form, or edit page, it renders the form with a post, and then inside of our form here, this is where we do the submit, and then if we already have it, we know where we're going, right? We're going to the update action. So in our routes, we have our post, we have our edit. If we refresh, we can now click on this edit link. That'll work. If we change this to test 2 in like case 3, for example, if we click update, we'll once again get an error where this doesn't quite work because we don't have a route that matches patch. So in here, we have to create this patch route, which is for update. And we're just going to patch the post/ID to the post controller and the update action. So if we save this, we can then come over to the routes again and then refresh. You can see right here, we have this patch. Again, there's nothing here. So it's going to be just like with our create action, where it's just a call to the actual post. And we're not doing anything like the edit underscore post underscore path like we have right here. We're not doing like a update underscore post underscore path because we have this HTTP verb right here that we can use instead. So we come over here and we refresh. We'll change this to, I don't know, and then some words. We can click update and that will now work. So we come in here, we can see the yellow text, which tells us we updated something and we are successfully doing that. Now, the last thing we want to do, of course, is delete the post. And I'm going to give you the chance here to pause the video if you are trying to follow along and maybe try and write the delete route on its own. I'll give you a hint. It is going to have a HTTP verb, and there is a reason why I use the word delete here. And it is very similar to how we do like our sign out links with devise, because we are deleting the session, right? And if you want to see how it's done, we'll just use GitHub Copilot here. You can see we use the keyword delete. We tell it to go to post/ID, and then we go to the post controller and the destroy action, which again, if we come up here to the post controller, we can see that the destroy action just calls @post.destroy, and then it redirects us to the index page, which again is going to work just fine out of the box as soon as we save this. So we can come over here, we can refresh, we can click delete on this, we hit enter, we can click delete, we'll see the red text that tells us we've deleted something, and then it redirects us to the /post page, which is this one right here, for getting all the posts, which is our index action. So if we come over here, it redirects to the posts URL, which correlates to the get posts right here. And if we come over to our routes, we can now see that we should have this delete right here. And again, we don't have anything here, so that's why we can just call a delete. If we look in our, post partial here, or not our post partial, sorry. If we look in our show page, we can see we have a button to destroy this post, and this will take us to a @post where we call a method of delete. So that's sort of how that works. You're just passing in the actual object itself, and then it's just going to figure out from that it needs to go to the post controller and the destroy path, because the model itself is a post model, so it knows to go to the post and do the delete action there. So yeah, I just wanted to cover this because there's been a couple times where I've done this before, where I've seen some comments, and I've seen a couple of them in recent days, where I don't have this explicitly laid out because we generated it with these resources. If we come in here and we comment all of that out, we save this, and then we refresh these routes specifically, you'll be able to see, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this one over here. I'm going to create a new tab, and we'll move this one over here, and we'll go to this same URL with those routes changed to be the resources. And we can see here we get the same resources that we just had, just in a slightly different order, of course, because of how I created them. But you get the new post path, you get the edit post path, you get the post request right here for the HTTP verb, you get the patch, you get the put, and you get the delete. Now, of course, we didn't cover the put, but you can see here the put and the patch both go to the same location. It's just a different choice of verbs. So what you can actually do, if we want to get this to look identical, we can uncomment these, and we can just come in here to the patch, and we can also do a put that takes us to the same location. If you're not familiar with what these HTTP verbs are, which you can see right here that worked, you can come over to Google, just search for like HTTP verbs, and in here you can see hopefully a list of the different verbs you can use. But I just wanted to cover this because I've been getting these requests, and yeah, it's one of those things where I understand that Rails does a lot of the heavy lifting, but it can seem like if you have these resources built for you out of the box, like you are only limited to what the resources can build for you. But I want you to sort of take a look at this and realize that we could do whatever we want here. Like we had that tutorial the other day where we created those custom buttons for like an upvote action, where all we really do is we just say, hey, I have a post here. I need to post a upvote. And then we just do a post to the post controller with an ID and a upvote. And at the end of the route, we tell it to go to the post controller and the upvote action. We do that as upvote post, and then underscore path gets appended to the end of that. If we save this, we can then come over here and refresh our routes, and we should hopefully see our upvote post path, which is a post request, just like the other one. It just has a specific route you need to use because it's not one of the core resources. And then we have the actual route right here. But it follows a similar formula where if you know how to create these things manually, you aren't restricted to what the resources do, but you can still, of course, use the resources if that's more convenient for you. So for example, if you're doing like comments again, you might have the resources for the posts, and then you have a do block, and then you have a resources for the comments, right? And then that has a do block, and then you can just do an end right here. And if we save these and comment all of this out, we come over here and we refresh our routes, we can see that this gives us a post underscore comments path, which is how we get the comments. We then have a post request that goes to /posts/:id/comments, which is your comments create action. You then have the new underscore post underscore comment underscore path, which is how you create a new comment. And these are all sort of set up like this, where it's going to have the post path with a comment inside of it, right? And then down here, because the posts are on the outside of these resources, it's going to be very similar. You're going to have the post just like you did before. The only key difference here is your posts also have these additional routes that you can go to for the comments inside of them. Now, if you want to have like specific routes just for the comments, like maybe you have comments on your post, but you also have comments for like your user page, profile pages or whatever, right? You can then also do resources for the comments here. And if we save this and then we refresh, we can then come in here. And now what we'll see is we have the comments right here for our post resource. We then have our posts themselves. And then down here, we actually have just a regular comments path as well, where we can go to /comments, or we can go to post a new comment by just going to /comments. So we could do something like, you could have something like a link to create comment. And then this just takes you to, or you just do like the @comment here, and that will automatically figure out it needs to go to like the post for the, the post for the comments, wherever that is. So there's a lot that you can do here with just a couple lines, and you could sort of see all of those different logics that are hidden here behind the rest of it. But yeah, I just wanted to cover this. There's a couple other things you can do. Of course, these Rails info routes are great. You can also just do that from your command line by just doing like Rails routes, and that'll generate all the routes. But ever since I found this helper here with this URL, I found this to be a lot more usable than the actual terminal. That said, there are a couple additional things you can do. Like I think you can even, like Rails routes and then grep for your post maybe. And that should give you the routes that are just related to the posts. And of course, there's other ways to do it. Like there is a Rails helper. So you can do something like Rails. Let me full screen this actually. You can do something like Rails routes, and then I think it's like -G, and then you can search for a new underscore comment, right? So that's going to be your grep as well. So similar to this one right here, if we do new comment, it's going to grab that as well. It's just a bit neater format here because it includes like the prefix, verb, URI pattern, etc. when you do the -G. As opposed to doing like the basic Linux version, right? You can also just check for like a specific controller if you want to. You can do like Rails routes -C, I think, and then you can do, let's say we want the posts controller. That should hopefully work, and that'll give you the routes that correlate specifically to that controller. So yeah, just some things that are worth looking at. I'd recommend looking at the Rails routing edge guide right here, right this one, I think, edgeguides.ruby on Rails. Nope, it's going to be this one maybe. Yeah, I guess it is this one. So the Rails routing edge guide, I'll have a link to this in the video description. It covers pretty much everything that I've talked about here and some other stuff in greater details. But it always helps to have someone explain it to you if that's how you learn. But yeah, hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully I will see you in the next tutorial.